UFC Fight Night Sandhagen versus Fontes this weekend. I'm going to give you a full card prediction breakdown, I believe, of all 12 fights on this card. It will be in an arena in Nashville, Tennessee, so hopefully this card will be pretty good with the arena crowd in there, making some of these fights a little bit more fun. Hopefully we can carry off the back of the last card, which honestly, it's been just going over this really quickly. The big cards that the UFC has made have actually hit. It seems like last year at least, the two big cards that they made, there was a lot of people falling out, and it did kind of happen this time, but the cards kind of stuck together and they were still fantastic cards. So just going into this one, hopefully we can come off the back of that inside an arena and they really show out here. But on the first fight of the prelims, we have Ode Osbourne versus Asu Almabaev. And I don't know, I've been pretty 50-50 on this fight. I was first going to go with Ode Osbourne. I saw Asu Almabaev, a very dominant wrestler. He is going to be a smaller guy in this fight, but he is fighting lesser competition in Brave. And I don't know. I think I am going to side with Asu Almabaev here. I was going to pick Ode Osbourne. Even Ode Osbourne, like some of the losses he's had, he's kind of been that guy right outside the top 15 that's making it tough for some of these guys in the flyweight division. Like he beat CJ Vergara, Zaruk Adeshev, but Charles Johnson looked, I guess, tough, made it tough against what's his name, Muhammad Makayev in the wrestling, and made it to split decision there. So he's kind of he's not a bad guy at flyweight, but he's kind of holding the edge there. He lost to Manel Cap, lost to Tyson Nam. He kind of just got caught in that matchup against Tyson Nam. That was a year ago. So I am going to end up going with Asu Almabaev. Maxim just beat Tyson Nam, and Tyson Nam just KO'd Ode Osbourne. And I guess they're both from the same little region in Kazakhstan. But I believe Asu Almabaev does train with Shavkat Rakhmonov. So I guess they're doing something right over with that team. And I guess I'm just going to side with Asu Almabaev. I think he's just going to be really tough in the wrestling department. Maybe get a finish. Ode Osbourne ended up getting finished by Brian Kelleher. And I think Asu Almabaev will be a little bit more dominant on the ground. I think he can get this one done. We don't know his reach, so I don't know how big of a difference it will be on the feet, but I do think Ode Osbourne will look a lot better on the feet. But whether this is a decision or a finish, I'm not sure, because even Maxim, who looked super impressive when in his regional fights from the same region, he made it was a really tough fight for him against Tyson Nam. But Asu Almabaev out wrestling these guys, like, he hasn't looked as impressive as Maxim in my opinion. So this is why it's going to be a really, really tough fight to predict for myself. But I am going to side with with Almabaev. Possible decision here. 80% of Tapology has picked Almabaev in this matchup. So I don't know. I'm not too confident in this one. I wouldn't touch it. Currently, I'm not going to bet on this matchup, but I am going to go with Almabaev. Up the card, we have Sean Woodsen versus Mairon Santos. And I think I am going to go with Sean Woodsen. I think this matchup was actually made relatively recently. His last fight was about a year ago in a really weird Luis Saldana fight. If you haven't watched that one, go check it out. It's like Saldana finished him and then celebrated, and it was just a really weird fight. I don't even know what to call it. It's just really weird. So I am going to go with Sean Woodsen. He's going to have a whopping 7-inch reach advantage. He's going to be 31 years of age. So I guess you can say he's in his prime, fought about a year ago, so I am a little worried about that, but I'm assuming he got a little bit better. I think he'll just be able to use his range on the feet. He's going to be a really big dude. He's 6'2". Mairon Santos is going to be 5'9". Mairon Santos is solid, but I haven't seen too much that has really impressed me to where I'm confident with them against Sean Woodsen. So I am going to go with Sean Woodsen in this matchup by decision. I don't see him finishing him here. Maybe there is a possible finish here, but 80% of Tapology is picking Woodsen, 58% by decision. I think that's probably about right. I don't know if I see the power in Woodsen's hands. I guess some of Woodsen's wins. I think he did beat Terrence McKinney on the Contender Series, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he did. Beat Bochniak, lost to Rosa, beat Zalal, beat Anglin. So this is going to be an interesting matchup. I do think Woodsen does win it, though, by decision. Up the card, we have Jake Hadley versus Cody Durden. And I think I am going to go with Jake Hadley in this matchup. Cody Durden is scheduled for 2 fights at flyweight. And I think within a few weeks, Jake Hadley, this one's going to be happening, on August 5th, I believe. And then his next matchup is going to be taking place on September 23rd. So it was about a month, maybe a little bit less than a month, actually, less than 20 days. He's going to be taking on 2 fights, and they're both against pretty good fighters, too. Bruno Silva's no joke, especially on the ground, and Jake Hadley is no joke either. He's actually a very good fighter, and he kind of got a tough hand fighting Alan Nascimento on his debut. lost that one by decision. But Alan Nascimento is just so big. He probably couldn't even do anything in that match. Like, let's be real. Jake Hadley was so, I won't say undersized, but he was just so much smaller than Nascimento. And Nascimento is actually a really good flyweight prospect. So I am going to go with Jake Hadley in this matchup. Cody Durden kind of has a style where he's just going to put a pace on you and try to out-wrestle you. I think Jake Hadley has enough where he can defend some of that, and I think he can do enough on the feet to where he can put some damage on Cody Durden. I think he does win this matchup, probably by decision. 80% for Tapology, I like it. 31% by decision, 48% by submission, and 14% by KO, which I think is pretty interesting, but I am going to take Jake Hadley nonetheless. I think he does really well against Cody Durden in this matchup. Up the card, we have Billy Quarantillo versus Damon Jackson. I am going to go with Billy Quarantillo. Damon Jackson in his last matchup lost to Dan Ige by KO, brutal KO. Beat Pat Sabatini by KO, which honestly surprised me, made me even pick against Pat Sabatini very recently. But he ended up finishing him in that match. Beat Dan Argueta by decision. Beat Camilla Kirk by submission. So he isn't a horrible fighter, but honestly, I'm not too impressed by Damon Jackson when he does fight, but he does have some solid wins in the UFC. Billy Quarantillo just lost by KO against Edson Barboza, a very, very brutal KO. Edson Barboza just hit him with a mean-ass knee, but he was actually doing pretty well early on in that fight until he did get KO'd. But Alexander Hernandez did very good early on like he normally does, and then ends up getting finished later on in that fight. So Billy Quarantillo, I think, will be able to finish Damon Jackson on the feet here. I think Quarantillo is actually a very solid fighter. He has some very fun fights as well, and I think he's just the better fighter on the feet. I think he can put on a little bit of a pace on Damon Jackson, maybe put a little bit of pressure on him, make Damon Jackson make some mistakes, use some of that fight IQ that I don't think Damon Jackson really has, to be honest, and I think Quarantillo just finishes him on the feet. Tapology has 71% for Quarantillo, 63% within that by KO. I think that's probably about right for this matchup. I am going to end up going with Billy Quarantillo, probably about second round TKO is what I'll say. I think he does end up finishing Damon Jackson in this matchup. Up the card, we have Jeremiah Wells versus Carlston Harris. I am going to go with Jeremiah Wells. He was gifted a decision in his last fight against Matthew Semelsberg, especially if you're going off of the scoring criteria of MMA where it's damage-based scoring. But we're not going to get into that. But Carlston Harris in his last fight against Jared Gooden did not look that good on the feet. He looked very sloppy, and I think a guy like Jeremiah Wells could end up catching him on the feet, especially with all that power in his hands. He's not the most technical guy, but if you have a guy in Carlston Harris who isn't that technical, or not even that, but he just looked very sloppy, especially in his last fight, I think a guy like Jeremiah Wells with the tons of power in his hands will be able to catch Carlston Harris. They're both 36 years of age, so they're both getting up there. He will have a 2-inch reach disadvantage here, but he's training with a very good team at Renzo Gracie Philly, and I think he ends up getting this one done by KO. 83% for Wells by Tapology here, 66% by KO. I think that's probably about right. I think maybe an early KO, maybe second round KO, but I think in the early rounds you'll see Jeremiah Wells get some get to KO. So he does have a really good wrestling background. He definitely can lean on that like he did in his last fight, but I do think he just ends up catching Carlston Harris, finishes him off in this matchup. Up the card, we have Raoni Barcelos versus Kyler Phillips. I am going to go with Kyler Phillips in this matchup. Raoni Barcelos got KO'd very badly against Umar Nurmagomedov, and Umar is very good. Well, he's good on the feet, but he's even better on the ground, and he's known for his very dominant ground game, and he put Raoni Barcelos out cold. And Raoni Barcelos is 36 years of age. I like that he took some time off. His last fight was 6 months ago against Umar, but Kyler Phillips coming off of suspension. Last fight was about a year and 4 months ago against Marcelo Rojo. Won that fight by submission. Before then, lost to Hadley which he probably should have won that fight, let's be real. But then even beat Song Yadong before then. And Song Yadong is a top-ranked bantamweight from what I remember. He just came off a win against Ricky Simone. Lost to Cory Sandhagen, but if he didn't get that big cut over his eye, that fight easily could have been 2-2 going into that 5th round, and he easily could have won that fight. So I am going to go Kyler Phillips. I think he just has a little bit more tools, especially at 28 years old, and he's going to be, Raoni Barcelos is going to be 8 years older than Kyler Phillips, and I don't like that he's coming off a KO loss. I think Phillips will be a little bit too much for him. I get he's been out for a little bit over a year, but I'm still going to take him in this one. I think he's going to be a little bit too much for Raoni Barcelos on the feet. Minus 175, I really, really, really like for Kyler Phillips. I think he definitely does win here, and I think a possible finish might be on the table for Kyler Phillips here, but Tapology doesn't really agree here. They say 77% for decision for Kyler Phillips, 11% by TKO KO. I think a TKO is definitely a possibility for Kyler Phillips. He has the power, but I do think you can definitely see a decision in this matchup. But I do think Kyler Phillips is a very good fighter to pick, especially betting wise. I think I'm probably going to put a little bit of money and at least include him in one of my parlays. I think he definitely does get the win over Raoni Barcelos in this matchup. Up the card, we have Ignacio Bahamondes versus Ludovit Klein. I am going to go with Ignacio Bahamondes. He came back after a year layoff against, well, before then, he fought Zhu wrong, took a year layoff, and then beat Trey Ogden, which he looked pretty dominant in that matchup. Trey Ogden's not necessarily a bad fighter, so it was a pretty good decision to win to get there. He was landing some good shots, but he did have about a year off there, so he was a little bit rusty coming in. He's only 25, almost 26 years of age. A little bit Klein in his last matchup, though. Drew with Jai Herbert, and he kind of showed he didn't have any finishing ability. Took him down, but kind of got beat up pretty badly off. Jai Herbert beat him up pretty badly off his back, especially early on in that fight. But I think Ignacio Bahamondes being 6'3", Ludovit Klein being 5'7" is just going to be so much bigger than him. He's going to have a, 3.5 inch reach advantage, so probably, 4 inches of reach on Ludovit Klein, just rounding up a little bit. He's going to be bigger. I think he's going to be able to defend some of the takedowns. He's a younger fighter, so some of this time off is definitely going to benefit him. 3 months off, I guess, isn't a crazy amount of time, but he is going to keep getting better. I think a possible finish is on the table for Bahamondes here, but I think a decision is definitely probable. He does have some really good striking on the feet. He does use his kicks quite a bit, and I think he can maintain a really good distance against Ludovit Klein and really mess him up here. But 90% picked by Tapology here for Bahamondes, 67% by decision, 19% by KO. I agree with that one. I think Ignacio Bahamondes definitely gets this one done. Up the card, we have Tanner Boser versus Aleksa Camur. And now this one's a pretty interesting fight. Aleksa Camur, 27 years of age, but hasn't fought in 2 years. I think I checked on his Instagram. He said that he had like some nerve issues in his elbow, and he said he really needed to get that fixed if he wanted to get a little bit better as a fighter. So I am going to trust him a little bit there. 2 years off at 24 years of age. I guess, well, he's almost 28, so 26. He took a couple years off. Hopefully he got better since then, but actually looked pretty solid against Nikolai and Gumuranu. Lost to William Knight by decision, which isn't great, but that was 3 years ago when William Knight wasn't afraid to fight. So Tanner Boser coming off a loss against Ian Cutelaba. Not really a great sight. Lost that one by KO. Kind of just stopped Cutelaba's losing streak there. Lost to Rodrigo Nascimento by split decision. Beat OSP, but like at this point, is that really a good win? I'm going to go with Aleksa Camur. I'm trusting that he got better since his last fight. He said he did have to fix some issues in his elbow, so maybe he's going to look a little bit better in this matchup. He did make it pretty tough for Nikolai Gumuranu, who I think is a pretty solid fighter, especially at light heavyweight. So I am going to go with Camur in this matchup. He is going to be, down 1.5 inches of reach here, but I think I trust him to win this one. It'll probably be by decision. We just haven't seen Camur in a little bit. People are taking Boser, which, I mean, I guess it's fine, but I don't know. I don't trust Tanner Boser to win this one. I trust more that, not that I trust, but I'm just going to be going with Camur, hopefully improving with the couple years he's had off. At least I hope, especially him being relatively pretty young, especially for a fighter. So I'm going to go with Camur in this matchup, probably by a decision. Maybe he does get the finish. If he does, I don't know, evolve a little bit more, but I think a decision here for Camur would be pretty good here. So I am going to go with Camur in this matchup. Up the card, we have Gavin Tucker versus Diego Lopez. I'm going to go with Diego Lopez in this matchup. He made his short notice debut against Movsar Evloev. Lost by decision, but had some really, really big moments in that matchup where he easily could have submitted Movsar Evloev. If it wasn't Movsar Evloev, it probably would have submitted anybody else. But looked very impressive, made a really big impression on a lot of UFC fans. So a lot of people are excited to see what Diego Lopez has next. And he has been cornering a lot of fighters recently. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I feel like every time I watch an MMA or at least a card, I'm like, is that Diego Lopez? Is that Diego? Like, I think he cornered Alexa Grasso. I remember he cornered Aldana. I think he cornered Moreno. I'm pretty sure he cornered a couple other fighters also. So he's been everywhere cornering a lot of these guys. You can tell he's a very, very good ground game guy since a lot of people want him to be in his corner. He's going to have a 6-inch reach advantage in this matchup against a 37-year-old Gavin Tucker, who's coming off a loss against Dan Ige by KO about 2 years ago. So I am going to trust Diego Lopez to get the finish here. Yeah, it's different when it's Aleksa Camur taking 2 years off when he's still very young. When you're taking 2 years off from 35 to 37, it's not that great of a reason, let's be real. So I am going to go with I was going to say Diego Lopez in this matchup. I think he does win this one, probably by submission, 77% picked by Tapology here. I think a lot of people are going Tucker here at 37 years of age. We'll see how that one goes, but 21% by decision, 53% by submission, and then 18% by KO. So I am going to go with Lopez in this matchup. Up the card, we have Dustin Jacoby versus Kennedy Nzechukwu, and I think this one's a very, very interesting fight. I think you'll see a lot of people split on two different ways in this matchup. But I am going to go with Kennedy Nzechukwu. I trusted Dustin Jacoby in his last matchup to beat Azamat Murzakanov, and he definitely had a chance in that third round to get a finish because Azamat Murzakanov slowed down quite a bit, but the fight IQ definitely was not there. He controlled him on the ground. I don't know what the hell he was doing. He was pretty tentative on the feet for the entire fight, just scared of the power of Murzakanov. And I know that's not necessarily going to really be the case here because Jacoby's a very, very good stand-up. I think he was a kickboxer, lost to Alex Pereira. But before then, beat Khalil Roundtree, got robbed in that matchup. But Kennedy Nzechukwu, coming off of 3 wins after taking 2 losses against Daun Young, who I believe Jacoby knocked out. He did lose to Daun Young by a standing elbow, lost to Ngumarano by split decision, but ended up being Carl Roberson, which he should beat by KO. Beat Ian Kutulaba by KO, and then beat Devin Clark by submission. And all these fights, it does seem like he does kind of struggle a little bit early on. But let's not forget, Kennedy Nzechukwu did beat Carlos Ulberg, who looks incredible right now. I know that was 2 years ago, but after he did beat Carlos Ulberg, a lot of people were kind of doubting Carlos Ulberg, and now people are definitely like, oh, Carlos Ulberg is the guy right now. So, I mean, I am going to go with Kennedy Nzechukwu. I have not been impressed by Dustin Jacoby. He's 35 years of age, so he's definitely getting up there in age. Kennedy Nzechukwu will have, what is that, a 7-inch reach advantage in this matchup. Just some quick math there, but 7-inch reach advantage in this matchup. I think Jacoby will probably be a little bit more technical, and I think he might even take the first round. But I do think Kennedy Nzechukwu will definitely be better as the fight goes on. So I don't necessarily see a finish. Maybe he does end up finishing Jacoby because a lot of people are taking him by finish. Maybe he does finish him on the feet. He does have a little bit of power in his hands, and he does have some submission abilities here, but I am going to go with Nzechukwu. I might take him by decision. I think I probably will take him by decision, but Tapology has him 65% by KO. I think it's definitely a possibility. I'm not too sure of it, though, because Murzakanov does have a lot of power, and he was hurting Jacoby. But I don't think Nzechukwu has the same power as a Murzakanov. So I am going to go with Nzechukwu by decision. A lot of people are taking him by KO. A lot of people are taking Jacoby. He's definitely a pretty solid underdog for this matchup, but I am gonna go with Nzechukwu. I lost a little bit of faith in Dustin Jacoby at this point. Up the card, we have Jessica Andrade versus Tatiana Suarez. I am gonna go with Tatiana Suarez, a very, very good wrestler and grappler. I think she just gets this one done. She'll be taller than Jessica Andrade. I guess a lot of female fighters are taller than Jessica Andrade because she's just not tall at all. She's 5'1". Suarez will be 5'5", and she's a pretty big girl for that division as well. So I think she gets this one done. Completely out-wrestled Montana De La Rosa. Did look a little bit rusty. She was coming off a 4-year layoff, so, I mean, I at least give her that chance. But Jessica Andrade in her last fight got KO'd by Yan Xiaonan and then got completely out-wrestled by Erin Blanchfield, I think Andrade did come into that fight on short notice, so I guess I don't know if I'll necessarily give her the pass there, but I think Suarez just out-wrestles her in this matchup, possibly gets a submission in the first or second round. And that's how I see her winning. She will have a 4-inch reach advantage in this matchup, but I don't see her falling within the Andrade cycle of combos that she throws. I think she's a little bit better than her. So I am going to go with Suarez in this matchup. I think she wins by submission. 87% agree with me on the pick. 63% by submission from Tapology. I am going to end up going with Suarez in this matchup. Up the card to our main event, we have Cory Sandhagen versus Rob Font. Cory Sandhagen was supposed to be fighting Umar Nurmagomedov in the main event for 5 rounds, but that matchup didn't end up happening. Rob Font was supposed to fight Song Yadong, but Song Yadong pulled out, so Rob Font is taking this fight on short notice at a 140-pound catchweight bout. But again, Cory Sandhagen has been training for a 5-round fight, and I think his last 2 fights, he out-wrestled Song Yadong, or at least mixed it in with his work on the feet, out-wrestled Marlon Vera, which pretty much staggered Chito Vera for the majority of that fight, and he looked pretty dominant in the wrestling department. He has gotten way better, and you assume against Umar Nurmagomedov, he's definitely been working on his wrestling and grappling, especially against a very heavy wrestler in Umar Nurmagomedov. So I think Cory Sandhagen does the same thing he does in his last couple fights, mixes in the takedowns, does some really good work on the feet, uses a lot of his kicks, because I think he can do a really good job sitting out of range against Rob Font and land some really good strikes. And remember, Rob Font coming off a win against Adrian Yanez, which I did pick Yanez in that matchup, but Rob Font looked really good. But the previous fight against Chito Vera, a guy that Cory Sandhagen absolutely destroyed, won all 5 rounds. And again, Rob Font did look really good in that fight outside of getting knocked down in like the majority of those rounds, which pretty much lost him that fight. But you kind of question the durability of Rob Font at 36 years of age, taking this fight on short notice. I guess it is going to be at 140 pounds, but you already know Cory Sandhagen is really cutting weight ahead of time, especially for a 5-round fight, getting his conditioning fully ready for this matchup. And Rob Font was ready for a 3-round fight, and now he's cutting down to 140, I think a little bit earlier than when he was supposed to, because he was supposed to fight Song Yadong a couple weeks later. It's not going to be the same a couple weeks earlier. He's going to have to cut weight a little bit earlier. So I'm going to go with Cory Sandhagen. I think a possible finish is definitely on the table. Rob Font's pretty tough. He is 36 years of age, so you kind of wonder when he is going to get KO'd. But I am going to go with Cory Sandhagen in this matchup. I don't see how he doesn't win this matchup. I think he'll definitely be better conditioning-wise. I think he'll mix in the takedowns, look better on the feet because of the takedowns, use a lot of his range. I think this is a pretty, I don't want to say easy win, but I think I'm relatively confident in this pick. He will be at a 1.5-inch reach disadvantage, but I'm not too worried about that. 95% pick rate for Tapology here for Cory Sandhagen. 58% by decision, 32% by KO. I pretty much agree with that one. I can see it going either way. Rob Font is definitely kind of due for a KO at this point. Took a lot of damage, especially recently within the last year and a half. So I am going to go Cory Sandhagen, probably by decision, but definitely KO is on the table here. I think he does mix in a lot of his work here. Let me know what you guys think about this card down below in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.